This is Basic, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
Look, my game's lousy. I'm embarrassed to even have a conversation about it. All education is self-education. I don't think teachers put knowledge in your head.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Nadav Caine published one program for the Atari computer, MathematicTacToe. This educational program first appeared in the winter 1982-1983 APX catalog. I will read its description from that catalog. MathematicTacToe by Nadav Caine, recommended for ages 8 to 16, written in BASIC. 2-player arithmetic drills. Simple computation errors you make at age 8 can stay with you all your life. Don't let your child start out with these mistakes. Here's an offbeat way for kids to practice their basic computational skills. Suitable for classroom or home use, MathematicTacToe provides addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division drills on 15 difficulty levels and 15 time limit levels, making this program appealing to children with widely varying skill levels. The most difficult levels go beyond the point at which students normally memorize answers. The time limit ranges from 2 to 23 seconds. After choosing the kind of math problem to practice, a difficulty level, and a time limit level, the two players are ready to square off against each other on the standard 3x3 square tic-tac-toe grid. A player chooses a square to fill. The computer then poses a math problem which the player must answer within the designated time limit in order to mark his or her chosen square. The computer marks the square with the player's symbol, X or O, for a correct answer. The player forfeits the square for an incorrect answer. The game ends when one player fills a row vertically, horizontally, or diagonally, or when the players fill all 9 squares but neither has completed a row, a tie. Kids will delight in testing their skills against parents, but parents will happily acknowledge defeat in this case. The author invites questions and comments by telephone and mail. Review comments. The graphics could be more interesting. The user manual is very good. Requires Atari Basic Language cartridge. Order information. It was available on cassette, which required 16K of RAM, or diskette, which required 24K of RAM. Either way, it costs $15.95. It was APX catalog number 20082. This interview took place on March 17, 2017.
I think I was around 12 years old, and I think I saw someone from my synagogue, actually, like in Hebrew school with me. I went back to his house, and he had a Commodore PET. And, he just showed me Space Invaders, and I was blown away. I mean, I loved going to arcades, although I don't think any more than any other kid. And so I was just blown away. Then I'm like, what is this? And I had done a little bit, I guess, when I was in elementary school or junior high, around the same time, I was in like one of these sort of silly middle school gifted programs. And they did have me do a teeny bit of programming on one of the old sort of dial-up where all you could do was like Wampus. And, so it was the punch card. Mm-hmm. And so like, but honestly, I wasn't that impressed. Like I wasn't, when other of the kids were like, oh my God, we're on a computer and, we can type something. It still was not, to me, like, I'm like, if this is it, this isn't very impressive. So I wasn't that far into it. But when I saw the Commodore PET, and I'm like, wow, like you can do this at home, and it clearly has other capabilities. I want to know what they are. So I did some research as like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old. I knew I had a bar mitzvah coming up, and I might have some money, but like a few $100s or something to get a big gift. And so I researched it. I think there was a particular computer magazine. I went to like I found that you could go to a computer store. Back then, it was the kind of thing where you had to research it, and then you would find yourself in like a business park, and you'd be back where, I don't know, like they're loading trucks with, paper and stuff. So, and then you'd find, like, you knock on a door and you'd find that there was like a windowless place that sold computers or something like that. And I would sort of sniff around those places. At those days, my impression was there was the Apple II, there was the TRS-80, there was the PET, and maybe I didn't know much about the Atari. So when I picked up a couple of computer magazines, I can't remember which one it was, and I would read them cover to cover. I didn't understand anything about what they were talking about machine language and things like that, but I looked at all the ads, and then that's when I got aware that there was an Atari. And I just thought, I think the first time I saw an Atari, I was just kind of amazed that anyone would buy a TRS-80 or a Commodore PET. And I hadn't really seen the Apple II much, but it didn't look that impressive to me. I mean, I think I saw them all close up in some way. So for me, I'm like, well, like the Atari's clearly more advanced, Atari 400 and 800. And so when I was really psyched, I remember like the day I got some bar mitzvah money, I bought locally. There was a little guy with a TV repair shop, and he also sold Ataris. And I was very happy to buy from him. I got an Atari. I think I started with a 400, and then I think I upgraded to an 800, and I got the basic cartridge with it, and I think Space Raiders, and I was happy. And at that point, I guess that covers all the lead up.
Okay, great. So now you got the machine, and what did you do with it? Were you playing games? Were you programming? What were you doing?
Exactly. I think at first I was excited just to play games, and I was psyched for the ROMs. I mean, I thought that the ability to do ROM, and those days, I mean, I had the cassette. I did not have I had a floppy drive in the cassette. There was no hard drive or more sophisticated system then. And for me, I mean, I didn't own it, and I eventually did that. But so for me, I'm like, okay, I played Space Raiders. I was blown away. I loved the 3D. I thought it was great. But otherwise, there was the basic cartridge installed. Yeah. So at that point, when you kind of get bored of Space Raiders, I'm like, okay, well, how do what can I do with basic? And I don't exactly know whether I just read the manual. They're great 3-ring binder manuals. And I think I worked my way through the binder. And because I don't think the magazines were very helpful, because the magazines were a little bit more advanced. They'd have machine language subroutines and things. I didn't even know what that was. And so I think I just taught myself basic, I think, from the 3-ring binder. And then I had this idea, I think, for school. I was still in the gifted program. I mostly just goofed off. And so I know that they were expecting something from me, like some kind of project, and to show why I got out of class for 3 hours a week. And because I really didn't do anything with it. I just goofed around the hallways and stuff. So that's when I got the idea. I can sell. They kept saying, "What are you interested in?" And I said, "Computers and programming." And they're like, "Well, why don't you program?" I think they suggested something educational, something for school. I mean, they're not going to let me program a game. Besides, I didn't have the skills, program a good game. And so I thought, okay, fine, tic-tac-toe is probably something I can swing with some math. And I basically just taught myself how to do it, and using the, basic, and, by making mistakes and running the program over and over. So it came from not having the money to buy more things, and the fact that I managed to buy the Space Raiders cartridge, and I had the basic cartridge. Over time, I slowly got some other games and things like that. But and so that's what got me to do it, and it got me checked off for my high school, gifted program, that he actually did something, and it was gratifying. I mean, I just love that feeling of programming where I get it today in other ways, but something doesn't work out, you fix it, it works better, then it still doesn't work out until you make it all work. And I also like the fact that a game like tic-tac-toe, which is utterly unchallenging, once there's a chance you could get a math problem wrong, it changes the game. So that was, it provided a kind of tension to a well-worn game that's actually boring, and made it exciting.
Cool. Nice. So at what point did you decide you were going to submit it to Atari Program Exchange?
It's a great question. I know it's a long time ago. I'm pretty sure that they sent me a catalog of games that people were programming. And I think in it said you could submit a game. And so I read everything that came from Atari. I think I started with the 400, but I quickly was like, I want the 800. This thing rocks, Yeah. And I got up to the 800, and I think and I bought printer and the SCSI external thing, and I think I can't remember if I went up to a hard drive. I think I was still working off of floppies, but so at that point, anything I got from Atari I would read. I was so loyal to the company, and like many people, obviously I probably wouldn't be doing this interview. I still am. And so like there was something special about that company. And I remember even like reading everything I could read about it. I used to go to the CES or the Consumer Electronics Conventions in Philadelphia.
Uh-huh.
I'd be like one of the only kids there. My parents would drop me off. I was like 14, 15. I loved walking around the booths.
Wow.
And so in that sense, I think when I got something from Atari, it said, here's some games, you could submit one. I'm like, I'll submit this.
Yeah.
I never, look, my game's lousy. I'm embarrassed to even have a conversation about it. But I couldn't believe it when they wrote back and they're like, we'll take it. And I knew why, even at the time, which is I don't think they said anything in their nice letter that said, we'll take it. It's great. We're like, we'll put it in the catalog. And if anyone wants it, fine. But I think they were thin on educational software. And at that point, I didn't end up long-term going into computers, but I think that would have been my niche, which is, look, there's this niche for software that's educational. And I mean, I don't mean to jump the gun in the interview, but as a dad now with two little girls, even my 6-year-old, she wants to be a programmer because basically the games that she has available to her on the iPad and the Kindle aren't good enough. They're either just arcade with no education or they're educational and they're boring. And so it's amazing that here, a generation later, we're still in that position, which is my game was accepted because the pickings are so slim in educational stuff. It's so rare to get a game that like really is awesome and educational. And so I think that's why they took it. And people actually did buy it.
Nice. Yeah, that's my next question. How did you make any money off it? Was it allowance money, how'd it go?
For me, my memory is that I made something like $1,000, which for me was huge. I mean, It means I forget how much I got for each one. I mean, if I got $10 for each one or something.
Oh no, you probably got pennies.
Oh really?
Yeah. I mean,
I can't remember what. Yeah.
They paid 10% royalty. And I had the price in front of me, but they were selling it for like $20 or something. So you were making a buck or two.
Right. So I suspect I made in the high hundreds, probably like 800. That's my memory. And one of the reasons I know is because I poured it all back into the company. That's when I'm like, I'm going to get, SCSI port. I'm going to get the hard drive instead of the floppy drive if I did. And, whatever, I'll upgrade my monitor, even though back then it was just a TV with an adapter. But and I bought software. I bought more games, both by Atari and by others. So for me, it was more money to feed the hobby. And otherwise, which I wouldn't have had. I mean, I come from a wonderful middle-class family, but, had an allowance of $5 a week for walking the dog. I wouldn't have had, if without a bar mitzvah, I wouldn't have been able to buy a computer. I mean, these days, I think we're all so much more flexible. If my kids make a case for something, I buy it for them. Right. But back then, it was more America in the 1970s. So it's like, $5 a week was already a high school allowance, and it wasn't going to become more than that. So thank God that it fed my habit.
Excellent. Very cool. And that's the only program that you published, it looks like.
I'm glad you asked. So when I went to college, and I decided everyone else seemed to have something to do over the summer. So my summer between high school and college, and then I think even the summer after that, I programmed another game. And I spun it off of the same idea, which is I figure Hangman is a game that has no tension to it, or very little tension, although actually it's weird. My 6-year-old loves Hangman. So like Hangman is actually, so even more than Tic-Tac-Toe, but like Tic-Tac-Toe, it's a classic game that is timeless. Like almost anyone learning their letters or beyond it can spend time waiting for their pizza to get made playing Hangman.
Yeah.
And I figured, again, with math problems, or something like that, if you try for a letter and miss, it is like Wheel of Fortune, which I think was around back then, but I'm not sure. But it provides that tension. You miss a letter, it ratchets up the tension. So I really spent time this time programming in a really cool Hangman game. And I did use the magazines to learn some machine language subroutines, which I didn't fully understand. I would take pre-done routines and then just try to manipulate them because I had not taken courses in anything. I think I signed up for Cobalt or something at school, or I learned some Pilot, but it wasn't going to get me there. That's all that was available back then was like, and at least where I was. And so I really made it good and briefly put, it was Hangman enhanced so that it was a game where you actually you were an ambassador to the Martians. In the beginning you find out, and it wasn't just with text. I actually managed to do. I really ratcheted up to have some better graphics and some real motion. So you basically are sent to Mars through a force field that we just figured out how to penetrate, and the Martians greet you and then put you to the test. And so the test starts with basic hangman in terms of, but it was sentences. So they were they were public domain quotes from history, from Shakespeare, from Plutarch, from Plato. They were classic quotes from the Western tradition or from the Earth tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you could get it, it used math, but then you would have to guess the quote and get it perfect. And then if you got through that, there was a lightning round where you had a lightning round with a particular value. And so either friendship or teamwork or, something like that, sort of like the Aristotelian virtues. And it was really fun. I mean, and the way you chose letters was you shot at them with a gun and with like an earth cannon. And so I cribbed some from the magazine, some of the public things that really made for great graphics and great action. And it was awesome. But when I sent it to them, I can't remember. I mean, it must have been about 85, something like that. They basically sent me a letter back saying they liked it. It would need a little tweaking because I wasn't an expert in graphics. They're like, they like it. They want the graphics a little better here and there. But at that point they were going defunct anyway. Like by the time I was fixing it over the summer between like 85 and 80, like summer of 85, I think. It was already like they were closing that down or something like that. Like they were like, it was already like, nah, this isn't going to happen. And I got busy with college. So I was a little sad. I have a game in the can that never got expressed.
I'm sorry. That's the worst.
That's okay.
Um,
You're right. After like 8 months of work, but whatever.
Someone at APX once told me that they got so many versions of Hangman submitted. It was just like ridiculous. That was like the game everyone
Oh, you know what? Maybe that was it. So maybe and that makes me feel better. Like anyone. I mean, I know people now. I lived in Silicon Valley for a while. I mean, there are people who spend a year working on a major project for Qualcomm or Google or someone, and then for whatever reason they're like, yeah, we're gonna skip it. Or great games. I'm a big fan of I'm blanking up, but the guy who's famous who did Psychonauts and Grim Fandango and stuff like that. And I'm like, I would buy anything this guy did. And you find out, he spent 8 months at this company doing a game, but they didn't release it. So I figure doing a Hangman that they didn't accept, I'm like, this is nothing compared to what other people go through.
You don't still have that, do you? The disc or anything?
I wonder. I mean, unfortunately, my stuff got put up in an attic, and then my parents moved, and they wanted me, rid of my stuff. Yeah. And I think that I recently, when my parents downsized, they're pretty old. I packed. You know what I did? I packed up all of my Atari stuff. I'd saved everything, and the truth was that I think I even tried to boot it up, and I think it. I mean, I examined it. Some of the glue and stuff, inside had deteriorated, but otherwise my stuff was in good shape. So what I did was I packed everything up. I had all the peripherals and all of my software. I packed it in a box. I went on eBay, and I think it was eBay, and I tried to find someone who clearly was a collector of Atari. Or it may have been somewhere else on the net, but I would have started with eBay, and then maybe from eBay gotten a sense of who's buying, and then tracked them down through Google separately. And I found a hobbyist who collected stuff. It was clearly not selling it. He was just buying it. And he and I exchanged some emails. I forget who it was. And I just sent him all my stuff for free. Oh, nice. I was like, look, someone who cares. But I think I may have saved a floppy of my game. And if I find it at like my parents' house or in my files, I'd be happy to send it somewhere.
Yeah, if you send it to me, I can get the data off it, and we'll get that published. And
that'd be super fun.
I'll send you $1 for every copy we sell, which will be $0.
No, that's okay. You can put it in the till for the 5 copies you sell.
Great. No, that's awesome. That's neat. That's really cool. So today you're a rabbi, is that right?
That's right.
Cool. So you went from Atari bar mitzvah to rabbi, so I see a direct line from the Atari computer to what you do now.
Exactly.
So tell me about that. I've talked to a lot of people, and kind of the weirdest. I don't mean weird, but
No.
a lot of people who ended up in computers or writers or that sort of thing. And one guy runs a company that makes Halloween props and animatronic things. But Rabbi is kind
That
of
makes
out
sense.
there. So tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, I totally get the Halloween costumes animatronics. Like that's the I still don't get why Atari like why it didn't catch on more. I even think like I got my grandfather to buy some Atari stock, which I think before he died he held against me.
Sure.
But like I said, but anyway, for me the Rabbi thing is because I can tell the animatronic thing. Like Atari was so full of life and the possibilities. With the graphics and the 3D. I'm going to tell a quick side story, but
Sure.
I'll make sure it's 20 seconds. Okay.
Yeah, we got time.
Because I used to go to see the Consumer Electronics big show in Philadelphia and stuff, that somehow like one of the booths or whatever had my name. I got a call from a research company that was doing focus groups on computer software of like teenagers. And so of course I went. And it was interesting. I was in a number of focus groups, and every time they came around to me, they were kind of like, well, what are you looking for? What do you think the next step is? And every single time, and this is 1980, it was about 1982. Mm-hmm. And I would sell them three-dimensional. And the people interviewing me were like, well, like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, first of all, if you know the Atari game Space Raiders, it has some 3D dimensions to it. And then you probably know some arcade games like Tempest, or Tempest is a bad one, but I said like Battle Zone. And I said, like, those are the games that are going to be the future. The games that are like, I was like, there is already Battle Zone, there is already Space Raiders. And like all these other two-dimensional flatland games are like, they're incredibly boring. And I mean, I just think that this is the future. And there was a couple of programs I bought at the time that ran slowly, but could do things. There was like a labyrinth game, miniature labyrinth game that was 3D. It drew really slowly on the Atari, but it was still incredible to be immersed in an environment. And they laughed me out of the room. Huh. I mean, they just, the focus group people, they were like, yeah, whatever. We, like, let's go to the next kid. I want to blow stuff up,
Yeah.
Okay. So I just felt like people were even not appreciating the possibilities that Atari was already doing with more three-dimensional stuff. And still just, and anyway, and they weren't Rabbi. So I always wanted to be a philosopher. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in a home surrounded by both, by philosophy books. My mother had been a philosopher, and, so like, I just always was interested in life and exploring the possibilities of the imagination. I used to go to East-West bookstores. And so for me, it was like, I like to go to computer stores, and I'd like to go to the East-West bookstores and buy books on consciousness and, Alan Watts. And it was back in the kind of, pre-cocaine sort of druggy 70s and 80s, which were a lot more mellow. It was a lot more kind of pot. So it was a lot more like expand your consciousness. And I felt that way with computers, and I felt that way with philosophy, like whether it's Buddhism or Plato or it didn't matter, Nietzsche. And so for me, those were a natural fit. So when I went to college, I went to Princeton, and at Princeton, I majored in philosophy and religion. And I was happy in that. And after college, I moved to Indonesia, and I lived there for two and a quarter years, out in the sort of middle of nowhere. And that was fantastic. And then I came back, I did a master's in religion and philosophy and at Harvard. And then I went to Stanford on a fellowship to do my PhD in religion and philosophy, and it all felt fine. And I did 10 years at Stanford on my doctorate. But when I was there, I kind of fell out of love with what you would do as a person who actually does this. Because in other words, I love the idea of the brain being a very complicated thing. And I love psychology. I love the idea of the relationship between what consciousness is, or what the possibilities of the human mind are. And again, I think programming and computers, you get those creative people who often sometimes don't even know they're being creative, but it's kind of like when you're programming, it's almost like being in the dark and letting your brain run free, both with the math of the programming, but also with the imagination of what it can do. So what I found, though, as finishing my PhD was that that's not the way academia is. That, like, in other words, if I go to an ivory tower institution or a college and I'm teaching, and I was already doing a lot of teaching, it felt very small. I mean, I'm there with like 3 people trying to teach them Nietzsche or early Christianity or something cool, or existentialism. But like, it just seemed like, okay, that was nice, Professor Caine. Now, am I going to get an A or a B? I didn't feel like I was actually sharing it or doing it. And I didn't feel like I was doing much good in the world. Like, at least when you program a product and you get it out there, you feel like people are using it.
Yeah.
But no one I guess the main thing is, I'll wrap it up with this. No one reads books in this field. So like, I can write the best book in the world on this stuff. I obviously had the degrees and I was on the right track, but I didn't feel like I was really making the world a better place to write books that no one reads. Nobody reads books written by professors on just about any topic in the humanities. I mean, that's just the truth of it. So at that point, and this is the interesting part, I actually thought of leaving to go back to computers. So what had happened was not programming, but I used to spend a lot of time on the side, and I bet a lot of people do this. I found old people, and I found people at a local place for house for people with developmental disabilities, and like, computers. And again, so now we're talking kind of late 90s. The possibilities of taking an isolated elderly person and being able, this is even before social media, but being able to connect them even just to the internet and to see pictures of their old friends and to do email for people that they knew and know in another place, or their grandchildren, was extraordinary. But computers were notoriously complex. Like, they couldn't even figure out how to plug them in. They'd get a virus. The printer would be out of toner. So I just spent a lot of time, mostly volunteer. For some people who had money, I'd take a few bucks to fix their computers. And, I was getting more calls than I could handle, like, oh, I have a friend. Can you set up their computer? Can you troubleshoot it? So I thought about leaving academia and just kind of opening up a Geek Squad type business. I lived in Silicon Valley, and so I thought of doing that. I still not exactly sure why there isn't a better way to do this, but I know that because of Chrome and Google and Windows 10, computers are a little bit better at maintaining themselves than they used to be. But so I did think actually about leaving academia to go back into that side of computers, just helping people get online and changing their lives by showing them the possibilities of the software that's out there and teaching it to them, whether they're developmentally disabled, whether they're elderly. But at the same time, I was thinking about doing that. I had always been, as you said, with the bar mitzvah, I did religion and philosophy. I was an expert in Jewish philosophy. And I always feel that religion, unlike philosophy, is a little bit more open to the fact that consciousness is a bit mysterious and wonderful and should be celebrated. Philosophers usually end up at the end of the day saying something conventional. And so it was a great fit. So basically, when I applied to the seminary, they're like, oh my God, you're like a professor of this stuff. Come on. And now, for the last 10 years, I lead communities where I get to have a large audience to inspire people and share ideas at the same time as I help old people and people who are a little different and have extra challenges and normal people. And I help people understand their teenage kids who spend all their time staying up all night playing Minecraft. And, and I'm like, look, I can help you with this. So it's been a great fit for me.
Nice. Excellent. Yeah, because you stayed up all night playing Star Raiders, so it makes perfect sense.
Exactly. often, people bring a teenager to me, and they're like, I just don't understand what's going on, this, that, the other. And it's on another thing. And then I just say, excuse me, I have one question for your teenager. And they look at me, I'm like, just answer me honestly, and I won't judge you. How late do you stay up playing computer stuff? And they're like, well, can mom leave the room when I answer that question? And I'm like, just tell me, are you talking like 4 a.m? Are you talking all the way till dawn? And they're like, 4. And I'm like, and the parents like, what? You're staying up all night playing? I was like, yeah, come on. Okay.
Nice.
So anyway, yes, it does give me some insight.
Awesome. Have your kids played MathematicTacToe?
They never have.
No.
I don't know if there's any way to like port it into a PC or something.
No, there are emulators, but they're kind
Really?
Yeah, there's Atari emulators, so it could be done. Yeah.
Well, actually, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. No, actually, I'd love to do that because, like, my daughter's just starting out like with math, and she's getting good. But she's right; she's 6. Like, I would actually, yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's any way to send me a link to read more about it. I'm sure it's not easy to do, but I'm willing
It's
to.
a little tricky, but
Or I can just.
I'll be happy to send you the link. Sure.
That'd be great.
When we're done, I'll make sure I have your email address. Cool. And okay, I think I have 2 more questions.
Sure.
What haven't I asked you about that time that I should have?
Wait, what? What should you have asked me about that time in my life?
Yeah.
That's a good question. No, I think I think it was a great interview. I mean, I'm trying to think. Is there anything? No, I mean, I think I got everything in. I talked about how, like, they didn't know about 3D stuff, and like, no one seemed to care, and it was clearly the future. And I mean, the only other pretend wise thing I would say is that I think my time as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, really through about 16, 17, spending close time with the Atari taught me that all education is self-education. I mean, teaching myself to program, reading those binders, doing things, experimenting. And I think that was a lesson that was really for my life in general, which is I actually do believe all education is self-education. I don't think teachers put knowledge in your head. I think that, and I've won teaching awards and things like that. So I evolved into someone who's has some skills at teaching, and has had some significant success in that. And I just think that it was that taught me, which is I'm facilitating them to teach themselves. If I can't put any knowledge in someone's head, and if I can't stimulate them to just teach material, whatever it is, history, programming, whatever, then it's useless. And I think the education system doesn't fully understand that. But sitting in my room with an Atari 400 or an Atari 800 and saying, I want to do more of this. How do you do it? Figuring out how to do it. And, you know, like I said, I didn't even take any programming courses. Everyone's like, well, you should take a COBOL class. You should take a this class. But I mean, you could, but the only reason to take the class is if they provide the kind of inspiration and materials for you to figure out how you want to learn it. And I still think computers and engineering to some extent is a great area for people who really get that. And so that was the only thing I would want to add.
Okay, great. My last question is this. If you could send a message to the Atari community that still exists, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
I would just tell them, I love you. Like those of us who picked up, because like for me, it was so quick, like who picked up on what was special about Atari. And I don't know, and I also want to say not just the communities, but whoever was involved. And I've seen the movies and stuff about Atari, but like those guys, and they were, and I'm sure some women, but those people who somehow out of nowhere combined that creativity, provides such a great engineering product that was also just imaginative. It was to me the only computer that kind of let you into other worlds that you could design and make. It's still an inspiration. It's still like a model for all of us who fell in love with that. That love is still there. That love still abides. I wish, I don't know. There's no way that you can't bring back a past love. So I don't know if there's any way to bring back Atari. But there was really it was special, and it didn't get the attention it deserved, but it continues to inspire me. I mean, it did change my life. Sitting there with Atari and interacting with it and wanting to make it do things that really, that were really wonderful. Like they just were immersive and creative and fun. Anyone who was involved in making that possible, I still thank them.
Awesome. Good answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you taking the time to do this, this documenting, and that's a huge commitment.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for your time today. Super appreciate it.
Not at all. Thanks, Kevin. Take care.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, there are 2 ways you can help. You can help fund these interviews directly by contributing to my Patreon. A small monthly contribution will help offset the expenses of making these oral history interviews. Contribute at patreon.com/savitz. Or make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.